Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the PtX Lab Talk Plus series, Cluster, Crackers, and Beyond, towards climate neutral chemical production in Europe and beyond. I'm Lukas Hondasch, and it's a pleasure to guide you through today's session. Welcome if you're currently arriving. That's the starting of our new PtX Lab Talk series on clusters, cracker, and beyond. This is a two-part policy-focused webinar series, which brings together experts from policies, research, and industry to explore how Europe and global partners can drive the transformation towards a resilient, future-proof, and competitive chemical industry. So, welcome everyone. Before we start, as you maybe noted, we are recording this webinar, and let me also guide you through some housekeeping rules so that you know. So if you have questions, please use the chat. We will try to answer them live or pick up on them later. For technical problems, also go to the chat and let us know, and we try to help and support. If you need, there's enclosed caption in the toolbar. You can switch on. We record this webinar and slides will be shared afterwards. So you can focus fully on the presentations, and during the presentations, please stay muted and your cameras turned off. So after this housekeeping, welcome to everyone who's still joining. Let me briefly give you an overview about what is ahead. So this is part one of our new PtX Lab Talk Plus series. Today we focus on the EU, specifically on challenges and policy options. And tomorrow our co-host, the international ESC3 will host the next session and will give us a deep dive into PtX driving global chemical transformation, having a more specific look and perspective coming from Thailand and Morocco. And then let me introduce you to our today's topic and speakers. After I give you a quick overview of who we are. So we are the PtX Lab hosting this first part of the webinar series. We are a think tank located in the Lausitz, funded by the German Federal Ministry for Economic Affairs and Energy. We focus on how green hydrogen and derivatives can drive the transformation of key industries. So we focus from fuels to basic chemicals and support them to find the future-proof pathway. We support the market ramp-up of PtX. We understand ourselves as knowledge platform and go-to contact point for the industry and civil society. So also we're looking at the whole value chain and specifically also how to shape and evolve the legal frameworks, which is also the focus of our webinar today. So today's webinar focuses on Europe's transformation path for the basic chemicals industry and how policies and industry can work together to strengthen resilience and sustainability and competitiveness. So one highlight of today's session is the new joint policy briefing we developed at PtX Lab together with Kassel Institute for Sustainability. So I'm glad to welcome as two of the speakers, Clemens Schneider and Martin Hock, who are co-authors of this policy briefing. And Clemens will give us, as the beginning, an introduction into scenarios and challenges. And then Martin will follow with a keynote on policy recommendations and give insights from the policy briefing. And then I'm very happy to welcome Jaroslav from Vioneo, who will give us an industry perspective from a methanol to olefin industry case. So that's what's ahead of us. And now let's start with the first speaker. So the first speaker is Dr. Clemens Schneider from Kassel Institute. He's a researcher for over 10 years in the field of scenario-based analysis for transformation of energy-intensive industries, also focusing specifically as one of his focus topic on the chemical industry. And as I mentioned, co-author of this policy briefing. So Clemens, I will stop my screen sharing and then the stage is yours.
Thank you, Lucas, and good afternoon, everyone. Very happy to be today a speaker at this talk. My screen should be visible now, I hope, for everyone. Yeah, thank you for the nice introduction, Lucas. I'm at the Kassel University and the Kassel Institute for Sustainability. You can see our old logo on this slide. You will see the very brand new logo on other slides by PtX Lab later. And I will give you an introduction about a bit of a techno-economics about so the background of our policy brief. So what's behind? What's the challenge? What are we talking about? What is the challenge for the cracker fleet today? And what are perspectives for alternatives? And you may know that we have the steam crackers in Europe, which are the core parts of the petrochemical industry, the interface between the refineries and the polymer production. And these steam crackers, they have a specific structure, and you can see it on this graph here. You can see that we have quite a lot of old steam crackers in Europe, around 50, 60 years old, and they are quite small. And we have quite some new crackers. One will go online probably next year in Antwerp here. And other crackers in Northwestern Europe that are younger and that are also bigger and more competitive when you compare it to world scale new crackers that are arised in the world, in the US, in the Middle East, and in China at the moment. But in Europe, we have this specific structure, quite old crackers, quite small crackers. And we have a clustered risk. So most of the crackers are around 50 or 60 years old. And this is typically a point of time where they need a revamp, a major revamp. So investments are needed to further use the crackers. And not all the operators in Europe have revamped their crackers in the past. So we see that there is a risk now that all these crackers, all these capacities are questioned by operators. And we see a lot of in the news if you pay attention to it. So we have some crackers already shuttered down. And for others, we have announcement to be shut down in the near future. So a lot of petrochemical operators, most of them multinational companies, they are rethinking their European operations. And this is the stage where we are at the moment. So a lot of new crackers coming online in the Middle East, especially, and in China, also in the US. And they can be operated with other feedstocks. So in Europe, when we usually use naphtha. So this is the light gasoline of the refineries, of the refinery output, which is used. And in other parts of the world, we also use byproducts of shale gas extraction. which is typically cheaper than naphtha. And that is the challenge that European operators face at the moment. Why is this so important? You can see here is the naphtha and LPG part of the petrochemical industry. So this is the feedstock which is used, and this is manufactured or processed in the steam crackers. And the main products of the steam crackers are ethylene and propylene. But especially for Europe, it's also important that we produce butadiene, which cannot be yielded, which you don't have as a yield when you use other feedstock like ethane. And we also have aromatics, benzene, toluene, and xylane, but also these come also from other processes. The steam crackers, they are specifically, they deliver ethylene, so that's the main issue, that only steam crackers at the moment in Europe produce ethylene. Propylene and aromatics also come from other processes. And the steam crackers and the closures that have been announced, that also has effects on the value chain. We see that a lot of production capacity is closed in Europe at the moment. Around 2 million tons of polymer production is closed at the moment. And we also see that even more production capacity is closed when it comes to derivatives from aromatics. So a lot of going on at the moment, a lot of change, and for the chemical industry, the petrochemical industry, not for the good at the moment. So that's the situation we are facing. We had the pleasure to think about something very new, to think about an alternative future. This is also the reason, I think, why Lucas and the colleagues invited us to join their effort to do a policy briefing. So in the Green Feed project, we developed a roadmap for the petrochemical industry and a future without fossil feedstock. And so when you look at this slide here, you can see that we go from fossil naphtha and also a bit of waste, which we already use today in mechanical recycling. We go to biomass as an alternative. We go to more plastic waste if we can use more of the plastic waste for chemical recycling. And we might also have a feedstock from a synthetic fuel production, so as a byproduct for kerosene. And we might also have methanol from sweet spots in the world. So where we have cheap electricity and good CO2 sources, we can also, hope that we can get such hydrocarbon carriers in the future from a world market that is liquid. So it's waste, it's biomass, and it's CO2 based. Yeah, this could be the feedstock, but what does that mean for the technologies and the technology routes that can be used? Today, it's all about steam cracking, as you saw, and a bit of propylene we get out of other processes at the refinery, the so-called FCC plants. And we get also a bit of other aromatics from other processes at the refineries. In the future, we can still have steam crackers if we can use them, for example, for ethane still, that might be fossil. If we can have Fischer-Tropsch naphtha or other naphtha that is green. And we can have pyrolysis oil from waste as a feedstock for steam crackers. So that's about the steam crackers. But the other thing we have here on the top, these are methanol-based processes. And methanol could be a very interesting feedstock for the petrochemical industry in the future. Today, its role is limited to China mainly and the Middle East, where we already have methanol to olefin plants. So the olefins, these are ethylene and propylene that can be produced in the so-called MTO process, and aromatics could also be produced from methanol. So these methanol processes could be very interesting supplements, and they could help to get much more feedstock available to the petrochemical industry than we have today, because not all of the plastic waste, for example, is suitable for pyrolysis oil manufacturing. Others can only be gasified, and from this synthesis gas, we can quite easily produce methanol with well-known processes. Yeah, but what is the issue we have now? So today, only steam crackers are actually economic to produce ethylene in Europe. As I said, in China we have some MTO plants, but their coal is the raw material where the methanol is produced from. If we look at natural gas-based methanol, which is available on the European market, here on the left side at the bottom of the slide, you can see that in many cases, in many market situations, we could not produce olefins economically from methanol. And here on the right side, we have the steam crackers, and there you can see that the steam crackers really drive the market. So here is the bottom line of making no profit at all. And this is sometimes reached, but negative profits are usually not the case. So the natural gas-based methanol, for someone that would like to invest today into an MTO plant, natural gas methanol might be a technical fallback, but hardly competitive in the end. So what we need for the future is a green methanol ecosystem, and this has quite some challenges. So we need incentives to drive that change. The ETS 1, as we have it, is not enough to drive a feedstock transformation. It will only drive CCS use probably at steam crackers, but will not result in a feedstock change. And also the new yield structure that we have in a methanol to olefins plant, it's around 50-50. Ethylene and propylene, that is also a challenge for existing sites, because the steam crackers and naphtha steam crackers typically have a yield structure which is far more towards ethylene and less propylene. And we have no aromatics from a methanol to olefins plant, and also no butadiene. So that is really a challenge for existing clusters and regional value chains. Nevertheless, such a methanol ecosystem could be very interesting, and it could also be quite decentralized. So a lot of people working in the energy system field, working on the future electricity markets, they think about decentralized methanol production with decentralized with local CO2 sources and local electricity surpluses in the grids. So we could have a quite decentralized system that produces methanol decentralized and deliver that to the bigger clusters as we have them today, where we could process the methanol and making olefins out of it, and also do more circularity there. So it would be possible, of course, to use the byproducts much more better in a cluster where we also have the possibility to do CCS, for example, and even create net negative emissions in the end. Yeah, so that's an interesting vision. You can see more of that in our roadmap of the Greenfield project. The link is below. It's in German only, unfortunately, for all the Germans in the talk. I think there are many. If you haven't seen it, I think it's quite interesting to get a glimpse of a future methanol economy connected to the petrochemical industry. But of course, there are other possible users of methanol that could be competition, but also could drive the change at all. We have international shipping as a potential methanol users. We have refineries, green refineries as potential methanol users, methanol processing to kerosene, for example. And we could even have methanol as a backup for power generation. So a lot of interesting stuff around methanol, and I'm looking much forward to the other presentations that will give a more hands-on insights, hopefully, to such a future.
Yes, thank you, Clemens, for these insights and laying out challenges and opportunities that lays ahead of us. And building on that, we made our joint policy briefing together with the University of Kassel and Clemens Schneider. And we had stakeholder workshops collecting insights from different perspectives, condensed it down in a policy briefing, and Martin is now presenting us the results of it. So I welcome Martin Hock from PtX Lab Lausitz as our next speaker. He's joined the PtX Lab in February 2023 as an expert in international law and policy. Martin has a background including research and teaching in international law at Technische Universität Dresden, Leuphana Universität Lüneburg, and Queen's University Belfast. So the stage is yours, Martin.
Thank you very much, Lucas, for the introduction. Thank you very much, Clemens, and thanks to everyone who's here. You should be able to see my presentation right now. Great. So what Clemens has pointed out is we do have scenarios where we get to this green future, and what he said was we need a green methanol ecosystem. And what I would like to do in my presentation and in our shared work is we'd like to think about how do we actually get there. So our policy briefing, role of steam crackers in the future, we focus on recommendations for action and action for the sustainable production of basic chemicals. So how do we actually get to this future? And I promise to stay within my time limit. So some of these things will be, well, somewhat short, but we do have a question section. And also, as Lucas mentioned, I'm an expert in international law and public policy. So the technical details, I'm very glad that Clemens has covered them already. We had a crucial moment in time. We actually have a window of opportunity to future-proof the chemical industry as we speak. Future-proof what is our ideal. Our ideal is a competitive, clean, and circular chemical industry. And well, we're not the only ones thinking about it. And why do we have a window of opportunity? Because there's currently a lot of legislative and policy action going on. We have on a national level, we have the Dutch vision on sustainable carbon in the chemical industry. We have in Germany, we have Chemieagenda 2045. We have multinational things like the Sustainable Carbon Policy Package and EU Critical Chemicals Act. But what is most important is the action proposed by the European Commission and especially the Clean Industrial Deal, which is somewhat of a successor of the Green Industrial Deal. And the Clean Industrial Deal, which is focusing on competitiveness while having a clean and green industry, includes a European Union Chemical Industry Action Plan, which has been published over the summer. So currently it's, well, actually a window of opportunity. Also, as Clemens pointed out, when we look at the age of the infrastructure we currently have in Europe, crackers are shutting down. So this is really urgent. In order to get to a transition, remember clean, competitive, circular chemical industry, we propose two pathways to transition. We're mainly focusing on HVCs here. Pathway one would be remaining and having climate neutral steam crackers. And how do we get steam crackers climate neutral? Well, it's either steam crackers and CCS or steam crackers and fossil-free naphtha. So this would be the first transition pathway. And the second transition pathway, and here we circle back to what Clemens has said already on the methanol economy, is, well, a methanol economy. So two transition pathways in order to get to a future-proof chemical industry in Europe. But what do we actually do to get to these transition pathways? One pathway is steam crackers, and there are a couple of advantages and a couple of disadvantages. So when we try to render steam crackers climate neutral, one option would be steam crackers CCS, and the other would be steam crackers and fossil-free naphtha. Advantages are somewhat similar. We do have existing infrastructure, clusters, and value chains that can remain intact. We are talking about age-old industries that are established, so it has value to keep them. And also, Clemens mentioned that already, butadiene as a byproduct, this can still be produced when we talk about climate neutral steam crackers. But there are also some disadvantages, especially, but not exclusively on the CCS side. There is competition with other sectors. There's a certain uncertainty regarding long-term storage. I'm pretty sure everyone has followed that discussion to some extent. And also scope 3, meaning end-of-life emissions, remain unaddressed in that transition. And if we're looking at other disadvantages, well, fossil-free naphtha is still scarce and expensive. We don't really have a functioning market for this commodity at the moment. I mean, it is traded, there is a market, but it is, well, simply scarce and expensive. And we are quite certain that we will not have a sufficient supply for all steam crackers in the European Union. And also, there is competition with other sectors, for example, transport for the alternative feedstocks. So this alone, climate neutral steam crackers will not get us to a transition. This is why we do have a second transition pathway, which is, well, methanol economy. Advantages here are we do have a highly efficient use of feedstocks, mainly electricity, CO2, hydrogen. We could import methanol from sweet spots, geographically profitable areas, which do have good amounts of renewable energy, which can produce methanol competitively and also quite cheaply, and get to an economic advantage. And also, if we look at some evidence, it's early evidence, but there's some evidence, then large methanol to X plants might have a lower environmental impact than, well, compared to steam cracking, with fossil-free naphtha. So this is another benefit. Obviously, as everywhere and every time there are downsides, the main downside of a methanol economy over here is the different product spectrum. And we do require complementary production routes, and then we're back at butadiene. We do need on-purpose routes to substitute that and to get sufficient amounts of butadiene, amongst others. Well, we put these two transition pathways out there, and well, we all know that there are challenges. And well, there are overall challenges, and there are challenges which are somewhat more specific or stem from the governance and legislative sector. And the overall challenges are somewhat the same as in most industries that try to become green, that try to decarbonize. One is securing access to clean energy. This is really crucial, but also ensuring access to fossil-free feedstock. We've mentioned that already, but also mobilizing sufficient investment. Transformation is expensive, and even if you master the engineering challenges and master the supply challenges, you still have to build the infrastructure, and that just costs a lot of money. And then there are somewhat specific governance challenges. We do have legacy infrastructure, which slows down transformation. This is somewhat obvious, I think, but existing infrastructure is still, well, there's incentive to continue to use that. That is different than if you start building from scratch. Building from scratch has other problems, but for transition, existing legacy infrastructure can slow down the transformation. We have quite diverse stakeholders, suppliers, owners, producers, regulatory authorities, you name it, which may or may not, but quite likely may have conflicting interests and not necessarily align on an idea or a vision of how to transform the industry. And then when we talk about transformation, we also require a joint electrification and CO2 networks. This is quite challenging to coordinate, but also to actually plan and build. And then on a somewhat different note, we also talk about key facilities which are controlled by large international corporations. That is not a problem per se because they're large corporations, but if you try to legislate and induce governance on large corporations, those are somewhat more difficult to legislate than smaller regional corporations. You just have less leeway than a multi-billion large international corporation. But luckily, there are ways to overcome these challenges and to get to our transition pathways. And therefore, we have two policy principles. If you want to overcome these challenges, if you want to get to the transition, try to think along these lines. Policy principle A is a combined transformation path, and policy principle B is a cluster-oriented approach. And we have several sub-principles here, which you see. I just want to zoom into two of those, and the other ones I refer to a policy brief for time reasons, but I would like to zoom into establish a methanol economy. So what we have to do, on the one hand, we have to diversify supply, and on the other hand, we have to create lead markets. So in order to diversify supply, one way would be strengthen domestic production by using biogen residues and plastic waste, and then we will align with Circular Economy Act and the European Union bioeconomy strategy. What we could also do is, and that circles back to the advantages, is enable methanol imports, and then we could do things like international partnerships for methanol based on renewable energy, and also we could leverage European green guarantees for import and production projects, which kind of aims at how to finance things. But also you have to have demand and supply, and here we go, and think about creating a lead market. And well, how do you do that? There are several things that might come into play. One would be sectoral quotas. We could also talk about strengthening double auction models and long-term purchase agreements. Nothing of those is exactly new. It has been introduced and proven, and this is actually the great advantage of it, proven in other industries. And it also works at and works for de-risking the finance. Another zoom in into one of our sub-principles of the combined transformation path is, well, we have A and B, so we're still zooming in into principle A, sustainable carbon policy. And here we look at more into the policy side of things. Again, European lead markets for low carbon products would be beneficial. Then we could talk about quota regulations and purchase agreements. We could talk about including fossil-free products into public procurement directives, so the state or public agencies buying them, which would stimulate demand. We could think about expanding current legislation such as PPWR and ESPR, so that all fossil-free carbon sources are considered equivalent. And then we talk about things which are maybe not so obvious, but quite crucial, which is, for example, approval of production projects, and just make it faster to outpace your competition. In German law, this might be overriding public interest, überragendes öffentliches Interesse, or we talk about Industrial Decarbonization Accelerator Act. So there are leeways and levers to get to fast approvals, and also why not develop a sustainable carbon availability strategy at the European Union level? So there are several options where it could work on. Thinking about principle B, cluster-oriented approach, I'd just like to highlight a couple of things. So we're talking about clusters, not individual projects, not individual infrastructure, but really the whole cluster together. And state funding should target highest transformative impact and prioritize the cluster. And support could happen within the framework of Clean Industrial Deal State Aid framework. We could include things like a value transition fund, which might co-finance transformation and also fairly distribute costs. There could be things like a cluster and chemical park transformation fund. Also, remember, we're looking at the cluster level. And we also think about coordination, not really planning in terms of planned economy, but coordination, which would be required transformation plans for chemical parks or coordination platforms between European Union, states, regions, and the industry. To wrap it up, this was a lot, and it was a lot fast, but I'd just like to stress a couple of things. We have challenges. We have solutions, policy principles, and opportunities. We have an opportunity to transform the chemical industry, competitive, clean, and circular, with the Clean Industrial Deal and the Chemical Industry Plan. We have solutions to our problems, which is a methanol economy, steam crackers and CCS, steam crackers and fossil-free naphtha. There are challenges, mainly where's the feedstock and do we have enough CCS? Also different byproducts. But the solutions are based on our policy principles, which is a combined transformation path and a cluster-oriented approach. And with that, you can have a deep dive if you want to. We have our studies online. Feel free to check them out if you'd like. And thank you. And to have a motto, let's shape the future of sustainable chemistry together. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Martin.
If you could just end my screen sharing, I am unable to find the button.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for highlighting our policy recommendation, Martin, and connecting the dots for us. So as our next keynote speaker, we have Jaroslav Jelling from Weirneo, who will give us an industry perspective. He's Vice President of Product Management at Weirneo, with years of industry experience in the chemical sector, including 12 years at Dow, and will give us insights into what Weirneo is doing and planning on methanol to olefin plants. The stage is yours, Jaroslav.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Lucas. And I just want to make sure that if you could confirm if everybody can see my screen.
Yes, we see your screen and your slides.
Super. So let me start by saying good afternoon, and judging by the names that I see in the chat, good morning and good evening, depending where you are. Warm greetings from what's getting called Switzerland. Thank you for the introduction. My name is Jaroslav Jelinek, and I am the Vice President of Product Management for Weirneo. And I would like to give a bit of a perspective from a practical business, or if you will, project perspective on, and I'm looking at my notes, what Clemens called it, used it as a question, are we moving to the methanol era? Or as Martin called it, establishing methanol economy. So we are Weirneo. We like to call ourselves that we'd like to pioneer fossil-free plastics production exactly from green methanol. In order to explain you more about Weirneo and the details of what we do, I would like to take the around route, and I feel it's important to talk a little bit who we are and where we came from. We have been founded, and we are 100% owned by A.P. Moller Holding. For those that don't know, A.P. Moller Holding is a holding company for many sustainable businesses. And the most famous one being A.P. Moller Maersk, the big marine shipping company. Why at the very beginning I like to mention this is because you heard both Clemens and Martin talking that it is economically challenging or financially challenging moving into a methanol-based, green methanol-based economy. And why our project has a very strong and stable backing in the form of A.P. Moller Holding. The other pillar of this would be the aspirations of our owners, who always like to say that they like to invest in businesses that have a positive impact on society. To be more specific, going to the story of Weirneo, A.P. Moller Maersk has been for a while on the journey to decarbonize marine shipping, exactly by starting to utilize green methanol for their vessels. Not far from there, it's not hard to arrive where, in which other industry green methanol could have a positive impact, to arrive that plastics is a good area to consider. So having this strong baseline of green methanol in the future being scaled up for marine logistics, parallelly via Weirneo, we are looking to scale up fossil-free production utilizing green methanol into polypropylene and polyethylene. So we also like to say that through our first asset that we're working on in the port of Antwerp, I think right next to the only cracker that is being built that you mentioned, Clemens, we're looking to build Europe's first at-scale fossil-free plastics production facility that brings several simple value points to the industry. So decarbonize, deliver unmatching six units of CO2 per unit of plastic carbon savings. Due to the process, supply fully segregated and traceable polymer, while utilizing non-feedstock generation to green methanol as raw material. And obviously, again, due to the process, provide the drop-in quality, so let our customers enjoy a virgin-like performance for the products that we will be producing and supplying. Again, in simple terms, to specify it a little bit more, what is the project of Vioneo and what we will be doing? As a company, as an input, we will be using green methanol as a raw material. We're looking to build in the first instance or at the entrance a methanol to olefins unit that would yield propylene and ethylene, and right next to it polymerization units for polypropylene and low density polyethylene, supplying HOMO, impact and random polypropylene and LDPE to several end-use markets. Despite the fact that we were born not long ago, because it was November 2024, we're happy to see a lot of support and a lot of recognition, both on the legislative or in Brussels, if you will, as well as with some industry think tanks, consultants, or even within the industry itself. And one example that I wanted to bring is our work with Systemic. Some of you may know Systemic as an independent sustainable consultancy that had their strong role in shaping the European plastic circularity agenda. Some of you may have ran into the Reshaping Plastics report from 2022, where they were the first ones to model, first ones to have a comprehensive model of how the European plastics industry could transition to more circular models. This was a baseline, a strong baseline for both the industry and EU policymakers to frame recyclability as a key lever in decarbonizing and reducing waste. We like to think we went with a follow-up work because that was the work that we have been discussing and is included in our report together with Systemic, that even in the boldest scenario of building collection, sorting, recycling infrastructure, to be able to call that Europe has defossilized or has moved to fully circular models is a bit too far, because based on their follow-up models, the demand for plastics versus the capabilities, again, in the boldest scenarios, is still not sufficient in order to reach the levels that would allow to call Europe defossilized. And that's why we've worked together, because both us and them are believers that methanol economy, establishing a methanol economy, is the next bridge into truly defossilizing the European plastics industry. Since we are here to talk about policy, obviously there would be some policy asks that we do communicate externally. I'm not going to say anything that Martin did not say. We are very much behind messaging that strong bioeconomy strategy and circular economy acts are needed. in order to create a level playing field for solutions like ourselves. On a more specific level, we do need to ensure that bioplastics are explicitly recognized, that are included, and that they're included not only in strategies, but also in specific legislation pieces. We would like to promote, obviously, non-fossil plastics and any financial schemes that could support broader than our investment. And at the very end, just say that we would like to help fossils make their way into museums where they belong. It will be a little bit from my end, so I will let Lucas move to the discussion part of our event because I'm also very much looking forward to it.
Yeah, thank you, Jaroslav, for this interesting insights, also giving us a good basis from all three inputs for our discussions. Yeah, we heard that steam crackers are challenged as they are currently the backbone. We heard some policy recommendations from Martin to orient stronger on cluster-based strategies and balance a sustainable mix. And Jaroslav gave us a strong industry signal that it's viable to think and invest beyond traditional fossil crackers. So let's start with the bigger picture, the policy architecture. We've seen, as Martin mentioned, the window of opportunity arising, especially from the Clean Industrial Deal. And we also saw already some other frameworks coming up supporting the transitions. So like my open starting question is, are these frameworks sufficient to accelerate the feedstock change in the chemical industry, or do we need to make adjustments there?
Would you like me to give a practical answer?
Yes.
I would say from our perspective, it is a very welcome and a very anticipated great start. And when I say start, as a business person, I can't deny most of the pieces that we're discussing have in their name the word strategy. So strategy in business is a very important starting point. But we also know that in business, it doesn't end with strategy. It's also about implementation. It's about actions. It's about tactics. It's about the next steps. So having said that, I want to say this is a very right signal on those strategies. They do signal very well our ambition is and where it will be. But we need to, in the meantime, to bridge the gap between good ambition and investable business environment. We need what I mentioned, the specific EU legislative pieces, mandates, quotas, regulatory pool mechanisms, etc., etc. Only then, I believe, it would be more broader than bold players like AP Moller investing into, again, I'm going to quote Martin, establishing a methanol economy.
I'm actually very happy that you answered before I did, because it's always great as a think tanker to have someone who's actually in the industry to answer along the lines of thoughts one already has. So in answering the question, Lucas, I think it's important first steps, yes, but we do need more implementation. Here we totally agree. And I would say it's mostly where the money flows. And we do need actual investment incentives for alternative feedstocks. And then we have to look at clusters as well. So yeah, I don't disagree, and I'm really happy about this because it kind of validates the line of thoughts we already had.
I guess even just to add and bring a metaphor, we're
Please.
building a house here. we're closing the architectural design. That's what those strategies are bringing, which is a great first step and increases the probability and our expectation that this is a viable project. I say project, I mean the transition of Europe into more clean technologies. But closing the architectural design is not everything. I mean, we have to have the construction company. We have to know what materials are being used. We have to build the walls, put windows in, and we better start doing it now.
Yeah, talking about some of the mentioned fine-tuning and doing the implementation work both of you raised. A lot of talk is around quotas regulation, bringing in quotas for sectors, or thinking also on other market pull instruments. Like, do we need them? Like we saw them already in the transport sectors. There's also maybe also challenges like maybe Clemens, Martin, you can give a perspective, like what you think on quota, and then we can hear from Jaroslav.
Yeah, we definitely need quotas. So if we look at now these polymers that Vineo is aiming to produce, these are the polymers that are now heavily imported at the moment. So polyolefins, these are very cheap at the moment on the market based on fossils. All these crackers coming online based on ethane. It's not only Antwerp, it's from the world market. And we have also other dedicated polypropylene production, for example, in Antwerp as well, coming online. So, and our new methanol-based plants have to compete with these. But if we create a new market, or if we have quotas for green plastics, of course we can work, and we can create the belief for investors that they can create a business. Without quotas or something equivalent, I think it will not happen. So that this is what we need in the very near future.
We also do have to think about how we introduce quotas. Quotas are needed, but experience shows us, and experience is mainly quotas in the aviation sector, that a simple quota is not enough, but it has to be a politically secured quota. And what we see in the aviation sector and the SAF market is demand is created by quotas, but that we don't have the production because the quotas are under a heading of maybe restructuring them. There's a clause in the quota which says, I don't have the details on my mind right now, but which talks about reframing the quotas and maybe altering them. And if we include that phrase in a legislative act and in a quota, it creates insecurity and it creates an incentive to bet on the quotas being abolished or lowered. So if we introduce quotas, we have to make sure to introduce them correctly.
Jaroslav, what's the industry perspective?
I mean, it would be illogical if I said absolutely we don't need quotas. They are very, very welcome, and again, they are essential in order to broaden this appetite for investment. They are essential to create a level playing field, if you will. And I'm very glad I'll return the kindness, Martin. I very much appreciate that you mentioned the aspect of change. We need stability and we need consistency. Transportation energy fuels is a good example how those mechanisms do attract and unlock investment, do unlock downstream demand. But for a long-term sustainable development of such market or industry, if you will, obviously stability is key.
If I could quickly pick up on the question in the chat, and this is my personal view as someone working in the field and not necessarily in the policy brief, so I don't speak for anyone else here. Frau Weber, thanks for pointing out, we all agree that we need quotas, and why don't we see them? I'd like to challenge that we all agree that we need quotas, because at least from my perspective, if I talk to people who are not exactly in the, let's say, in the broader green field, well, the need for quotas is somewhat debated. So this is one reason. And the other reason is, if we look at the broader political frame at the moment, quotas are under pressure everywhere. In some way, the so-called, I only know the German term for Brennhaus, the end of the use of internal combustion engines is comparable to a sort of quota, which is currently under discussion and might be abolished. So yeah, we do agree, but I don't think it's such a no-brainer to actually call out that we need quotas, because there are still a lot of players and people that actually say, well, we don't need them and we probably shouldn't have them. And if we have them, we need to abolish them. And if we implement them, we have to do them softly as possible.
I agree, Martin. So many companies also in the petrochemical field still bet on a fossil future, carbon neutrality achievable with CCS mainly and fossil feedstock. So it's definitely debated. And we should also not forget that, of course, it's difficult to implement and to monitor them. So that's, but we need also experience in doing that. But let's not be naive about that. So it's difficult to implement such quotas. Probably we see it in other fields where we need to monitor and measure greenness of products, that it's difficult to implement them. And but we need discussion and also trials in time to do that. Otherwise, it probably will not happen.
So Clemens, you mentioned like currently too much companies still bets on fossil pathways, and like the perception is that like sometimes maybe the green pathways are more risky, like they knew, like they're risk connected with them. So like there's also a debate, how can we like do some more de-risking, like give like investment security back. So to Yaroslav, but also the rest of you, what could be done to like give more investment securities to companies? What instruments can help de-risking, or what would help like as a signal and like practical implementation?
Do you want me to go first?
If you want, you can also like, otherwise Martin or Clemens, if you want to jump in.
I'm happy. I mean, I'm happy to, but I wanted to think it through a little bit, just so I don't sound like a broken record, but I will. Let me put it this way. In terms of a green methanol, and that's something I a little bit failed to convey during my presentation. Producing bioplastics from green methanol is a proven scale technology. It's a polymerization that has been done for years. Methanol to olefins is a very well-known technology. There are very limited, if any, technological risks. There is an appetite from a limited number of bold movers that would like to go in this direction. And I'm thinking you ask about investment securities in the context of unlocking it broader. In order for this to happen, I don't want to get into specifics of investment securities, and that's where the part of being a broken record comes in. It's again comes to policy, because that brings, let me maybe start one step backwards. Today, we secure it in the form of offtake agreements, something that's a little bit more difficult to do, but it is the reality today, and it's somewhat a feasible reality. In order for this to broaden, with the right policies and mechanisms, this immediately broadens, and it brings predictability and stability to which the financing community or investment capital starts flowing in. I mean, we all know that in investing, majority of what you do, it's not about placing wild bets, it's about controlled risk. And that's what good policies, good mechanisms would bring.
Clemens, Martin, if you want to add, otherwise, I have also like plenty other questions for you.
I do think in terms of broken record and a lot of agreement in the room, I don't have anything to add. But I'd like to answer on the question in the chat after Clemens has added something, if he wants to add something. Otherwise, I'll just continue. I think, thank you. I think it's a very great question. Like all questions are great, but I like it if it's provocative. Why don't we see that scale of investment in Germany? And should we look more into new players? I think on one level, yes, we should look more into new players because it's always important to keep innovation going and to have new players. This is the heart of a market economy. This is important. From my perspective, and less from the perspective now of someone being in this field and working on transformation of chemical industry, but rather from the broadest perspective, I think industries that have a business model which has worked for quite a long time, and we see this, for example, in the car industry, but also think of companies such as Nokia with the advent of the smartphone, or think of the desktop and Microsoft and Bill Gates claiming that no one needs more than, I think it was 400 kilobyte of data. If the business model works, why should you transform? And I do feel that quite often, not always, but quite often, only if the pressure is high enough, and pressure in terms of costs or competitiveness or policy, only then companies start to transform to secure their business model. I don't know if everyone in the room agrees, and we finally might have a disagreement. But this would be my take on why don't we see that kind of investments on the large scale, and should we look more into new players?
I maybe not contradictory, but unexpectedly would say, my personal hope is that proving with our investment that this is a direction, viable business direction or a project, that the existing assets as it is, existing players in Germany that are mentioned in the chat, that will unlock, because for a big transformation, we need both the new players and the existing players.
Yeah, as you mentioned, that's maybe a bit of a wicked problem to work with the old, but also look at the new. Like Clemens, you looked also a bit at clusters and the challenges around it. Like Martin presented that we concluded as one principle to think cluster-oriented, not only focus on single capacities, which is maybe important to have it as a signal, but in the end, all these value chains connected has to be transformed. So like what do you think are there like key challenges which like hinder that like clusters can transform, but also what are maybe opportunities like which come from clusters which maybe can even leverage some change?
Yeah, for the clusters, things are really much more complex. It's not only about polyethylene and polypropylene. So the chemical clusters, as we have them, the petrochemical clusters, they need this kind of large-scale production to make a steam cracker viable. But the actual money comes from other more specialized polymers. And that's the business of the clusters we have in Western Europe. So in Germany, in Antwerp, in Rotterdam. So what is the heart of the petrochemical industry, you could say? But we also have it in Poland, for example, and at other clusters. So that makes them unique also compared to sites we have in the US, where you only produce polyethylene or polypropylene. So it's really more complex for the clusters. So you could quite easily have a small scale methanol based plant and have it in your cluster. But if you look at the value chains that are supplied by the steam crackers today, you have definitely more issues. And so it's a very careful thinking that you have to make. You cannot just close the steam cracker and have a methanol and an MTO plant. That would really kill a lot of very important value chains in the clusters. Some of them some of the risks you could leverage. You could, for example, quite easily import aromatics. But for others, like butadiene, it's more difficult and you get competitive issues if you have to import such products to your cluster. So it's really needed to have a discussion at the cluster level to start strategic thinking. Some clusters have started to do that, but the organizational structure is actually very different between. We have Ludwigshafen, for example, where we have one company running the chemical cluster, and we have the other ones. Most of them you have several companies, and that's really the issue we have, and that's why we need a lot of discussions and talks, and also create trust within these clusters that the transformation can be done within this cluster. Otherwise, if you just have a decision of one company, like for example Dow in Böhlen, so they decided to close the cracker. And now some of the other companies in the cluster, they don't have their local supply anymore. So that's of course an issue, and that's why we should have a lot of discussions and a lot of strategic thinking at the cluster level now.
So to maybe stay with some of the more sensitive questions, we know like on European level, we look more and more like on staying competitive or like becoming competitive again. And also, as we heard in the talks, like there is some practice already on methanol routes in China. So like there is knowledge. So therefore, maybe the open questions like how do you assess international competition, for example, from the expansion of methanol capacities in China? So like, is there room to explore it also like here in Europe, or like where does it come in here?
Again, I could take this question. Look, most of our team and most of us probably here grew up in the era of global economy. So let's remind ourselves what the strength of global economy is. It's been driving innovation. It brought a lot of progress. Why I start like this is okay. Understanding competitive issues and working on Europeans' industrial competitiveness. I'm going to say that from our perspective, we see, first of all, what competition with China, because all of the methanol, most of the methanol now is produced there. Second of all, it's rather an opportunity because from our perspective, and you've seen in Clemens' slide, how much of the future opportunity to defossilize manufacturing the molecules lays within using methanol as a raw material. In our case, as well, green methanol. So it's a tremendous opportunity when this infrastructure upstream is not available in Europe in order to potentially bridge it. And why I say bridge it is because obviously, I do understand that in order to secure long-term competitiveness in this established methanol economy, we do need to secure the entire production chain more locally as well. And again, it's an opportunity because most of the Asian assets are still coal-based. So there is a big opportunity for Europe to act and potentially work on green methanol assets. It is an opportunity, as always. If my neighbor does it, I can easily learn how to do it best. So again, I wanted to give a bit of a positive message on this, and maybe finish with a small scare off. We should not be scared of Chinese capacity. We should be scared of our European inability to act on an opportunity.
And what I'd like to add to that, sorry, Lucas, if I may, I love the quote to be scared of our own inability. And I think what we have to keep in mind is that there's an outdated picture of China. Some people still have that China is copying us. And no, I mean, they've learned tremendously. They've benefited from our open societies, but they've massively invested. They have ingenious engineers. They have amazing technology. And what on a very large picture, we in Germany and we in Europe now have to learn again, which we have all capacities to do, and everything we need to do that is to actually learn as well, and to innovate and to become more competitive while remaining open, while remaining socially stable, while keeping our market economies and social securities. So this is rather my personal wish, but my personal view is now it's time to learn from China and forget these old ideas of China copying us. But this is also a great opportunity and a great time to benefit. And I don't think we don't have to be scared. We have everything we need. We're still one of the most important and largest economies, and especially if European countries are working together, then this is well, it's a challenge, but let's keep it up.
Clemens, you wanted to add? Otherwise, I would move to a bit like on the fine architecture, as Jaroslav mentioned it, and like what we need in fine tuning and like some of the policy out instruments.
Yes, go ahead, Lucas. I could add, but let's move forward to other questions.
Yes, so like we heard, there's like strong policy signals and support needed. Also, quotas were supported by all of you together with other instruments, as we heard from Martin in the policy briefing. But many of them needs like a good governance, like good monitoring of it, like to ensure that if you deliver on the quota, like it's fully sustainable and transparent what you produce, and credible and accepted publicly. So talking about the monitor structures and governance structures of how should such quota be implemented, like what do we need there? Like, can we there like be flexible and do book and claim, which would maybe make it easy to have a market ramp up, or like do we stick with other methods of tracing green claims? Like, what are there like perspective from your side, and also what you think would be like acceptance and easiest to implement?
I could answer if someone else is trying to go ahead. Please go ahead. Otherwise, all right. Thank you. So when I think about what we need in monitoring, well, one approach would be then we go back to the cluster-based approach when we think about cluster-based reporting systems. We also need to have clear KPIs for sustainability. So talking about carbon intensity, resource efficiency, byproduct utilization, all these things could and should be included. We need public accountability. We need clear labels and clear certificates. And also what is always, or what could be a very good idea is to bring together industry and government and policy research bodies to see where bottlenecks are and to locate challenges and to overcome that. So in a very short sentence, yes, we need clear certification and monitoring structures, but we have to get them actually right to avoid any mislabeling, as we have seen in the transportation sector.
Again, in the spirit of being a broken record, obviously that brings transparency, predictability. I won't dive deeper into that. But when I hear monitoring, I hear also policing. So there is much more to it. And here I maybe will give you a more irresponsible answer, but I think I could. Once again, we need to act. So let's take things step by step. Let's nail down the intent. Let's move on to building, designing and building the walls and the windows of the house. So the particular pieces, legislative pieces that would create this market pool, let's worry about policing a little bit later. And I say it so irresponsibly because as Bionio, we have the luxury, or maybe it's broader than us. In Europe, in many industries, we have the luxury that we work with very, very respected value chains that could be characterized of good integrity. And in order to explain it, I'll put it this way. Nobody will be going 20 kilometers an hour over the speed limit simply because police is not there. That's how I see our plastics end use value chains. Those are big respected players. Once the signal, once the rules are in there, in vast majority, everybody would like to follow it. That's on the policing piece. And obviously, I don't want to undermine what you said, Martin, because certification, carbon accounting, everything that comes with it, it's less on the monitoring, but more on the framework work in my mind.
I'm very happy that there is some hint of disagreement, and I'm very happy if there's actually a bit of undermining, because otherwise we would be totally agreeing all the time, which is, well, somewhat boring, especially for the listeners. Yeah, I do understand that perspective, and I think it has a lot of value. Personally, I also do believe that there needs to be, well, at least a bit of policing, because otherwise we do have the problem of grabbing a free ride, basically, even in respected value chains. But it is perfectly clear and important not to overstate policing, otherwise we strangle the market, and then we don't get anywhere where we want to get.
I maybe misspoke. I wasn't saying policing is not needed at all. I was speaking from a perspective of a startup of 20 people who tried to push a $1.5 billion project forward. It's let's focus on things step by step. So at the moment, it's
absolutely
1, 2, 3, of course, but let's take it up when the time is needed. Now it's important to just move forward.
Absolutely.
I agree that we have to learn a lot about these kind of instruments. So policy has to learn, companies have to learn, but we might not have the time. So we have a lot of pressure on the chemical industries. And of course, we could say, okay, let's forget about the old industries, but I think that is not a really politically feasible thing to let them just die due to ETS restrictions. So I think we also have to work with them and make them transform and give the right signals. And we might also need other instruments that are a bit dirtier, like tariffs, to protect some of the industry. So we discussed that in the steel industry, obviously. So there is the pressure now. CBAM is not really working for them. So also there, I think people are learning. And we might need dirtier instruments in the meantime to work with, but we still need to investigate the more refined things and more refined instruments to get to a green market in Europe, but also to just not leave everything out. I agree. There's a lot of opportunities coming with China as a methanol supplier for the European market. And that would not be too harmful if it's really green, because methanol is really not a very special product. So you could switch from one country as a supplier to another. So that's not too critical, I think. And indeed, it is an opportunity, but it is also creates stress, of course, on existing industries that we have. So we need a really careful strategy, and we have still to learn, I think.
So we're coming slowly to an end. So I will give each of you, if you want, the opportunity to do like a closing remark, maybe reflecting on what decisive political measure you want to see implemented in the next 2 years to enable progress. You can also restate your points from before, and then I will have an outlook on tomorrow, and then we wrap up. Who wants to start your closing remarks?
I maybe would like to start with a closing remark that's more of a call to action. And I'm sorry for not bringing the tool and only with a call to action. And I'll allude, I just came back yesterday from K-Show. All of you know K-Show, the biggest plastics and rubber fair that happens in Dusseldorf. We do talk a lot about transformation in the industry in Europe and how we would lead that. If I was to judge by the amount and specifics of the conversations we've had at this fair on where the leading region would be, I'm not sure anymore that it's Europe. And that's why I wanted to give this call to action. Let's get what we've been discussing today moving forward and really do regain the competitiveness of the European industry through being truly sustainable.
I'd like to add one facet of, or one aspect of the problem we haven't really touched so far. And I would just like to point out we do have to ensure societal support, because if we don't have broad support in the population and amongst the people living here and the workers, it is going to be difficult to transform the industry. And this is also where we circle back to clusters. So we need good jobs. We need a tangible benefit through transformation, and we need to secure that, because otherwise we're going to end up in a situation which we have in other industries where there's a rollback on decarbonization and green industries.
Yeah, my closing remark would be to really create a kind of methanol-based industry, but also not forget really the upstream thing, to create a methanol production economy, so to say. So I sketched a regionalized vision, but it could also happen all at the chemical parks. Let's be sure about that. It don't have to be such a regionalized vision in the end. So that would be really needed to lock in, so to say now, some of our assets into methanol. And I would be not too scared if someone comes, okay, for resiliency issues would say, okay, we also rely a bit on natural gas-based methanol in the end to secure our supply. I think that we should not make such a mistake to really bind industry also in the short term with their projects to use just green. I think we should make methanol happen, and we should leave some space for industry to also react in the short term. I think that's important for investors to leverage some of the risks.
Okay, so thank you. So we have a window of opportunity, but as Jaroslav said, it's maybe slowly closing. So we need like policy design and support to use it wisely. So therefore, have a look in our policy briefing. It will be online next Monday. So this was today like your exclusive preview of our coming content. And what is also upcoming is tomorrow, the second part of the PtX Lab Talk series. It takes place at the same time as today and under the same link. So there we will look ahead like on a more global scale and hear cases from an international perspective from Morocco and Thailand. So tune in tomorrow when the International Sustainability Chemistry Collaborative Center, EC3, will host the next part of this webinar session, and like keep us connected and like let's keep discussing how to progress on this. And goodbye and thank you for tuning in.